Jyotika Jogi. Welcome to the channel Kahani's Golden Bytes. Thank you for taking your time to be on the channel.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks a lot.
So, Professor Jyotika Jogi, may I please request you, for the benefit of our viewers, to give a little background about yourself, please?
I'll start with my schooling. I graduated from a small school in the heart of Delhi called St. Thomas's Girls Senior Secondary School. And it was then a very good school, and till date it is considered to be one of the top girls' school in India. So that school made the foundation, and then I went on to finish my honors in physics from Miranda House, Delhi University. Did my MSc in Electronic Science from the Department of Electronic Science, Delhi University, which is situated at the South Campus. And got into a job after that, started teaching at Venkateshwara. While I was teaching, I did my MPhil. And much later, I did a PhD. But in the meantime, I moved from Venkateshwara to Atmaram Sanatan Dharm College. Venkateshwara was a 3-year stint on a temporary position, and got selected on a permanent position in Atmaram Sanatan Dharm College as a lecturer. Then I started in 1988 teaching in Venkateshwara and moved to Atmaram Sanatan Dharm in 1991.
Amazing.
And since then, I've been there with a minor period where I moved on to a deputation somewhere. I'll talk about it later, but I'm in Atmaram since 1991, Atmaram Sanatan Dharm College, University of Delhi.
Lovely. I recall it, this college coming in a movie, once, a Bollywood movie too, but, so so Professor, what subject do you teach at Atmaram?
I teach electronic science. I teach the undergraduate students who are doing their honors in electronic science. Okay. So there is a degree called BSc Honors in Electronic Science. Mostly people misunderstand it and confuse it with an engineering degree. This is not a BTech in electronics. Mm-hmm. It is a BSc Honors in Electronic Science. We teach the science behind electronics. Whereas the IITs and other engineering colleges teach them the application of electronics, the technology and the application of electronics. So we are teaching the theory, the main hardcore fundamental electronics.
Fundamental theories. So Professor, does it involve no practicals at all, or is there a element of practical?
No, there is a very important component of practicals. There is a hardware lab with every paper, and there's a software lab with every paper. So we have a very strong component of practicals. In fact, every paper is about 150 marks, in which there is 100 marks are theory and 50 marks are practicals. Quite often it could be 75 also, but mostly it is 150. 100 for theory and 50 for practicals. And the 50 is both hands-on in hardware lab and software application also.
So there's a lot of hands-on, even though there's the
absolutely. Yes, the practical component is very important. And the students need to know how to execute what they learn in theory. So they have to go to the lab and actually see those experiments happening and do them themselves. So that is when they really understand the subject. Otherwise, sciences, I have a feeling you cannot understand till you don't do a practical in what you're studying. So every paper there is a practical component. In fact, a paper like mathematical engineering has a practical component as well.
Wow. So every paper in this course has a practical angle to it?
Yes, there is a paper in applied mathematics. Applied mathematics, that too has a practical component.
Amazing. So in these, last 2 years where the world has gone upside down, everybody's learning things in a very different manner. Did the students and the teaching community face a challenge because of the COVID situation and moving online, and was it still doable? The practical side, it was.
We had no choice. Wow. The work has to go on. We cannot let a situation like the pandemic that we went into stall academic progress of these students. So we had to continue. There was a period when there was a total lockdown and people were unwell. and things were in a bad way. But that was only a few months. And rest of the time we were on with our online classes. And in fact, I would say that yes, there was a negative part of it, negative aspect of it, and that was, for instance, for a teacher like me, when I am facing a class of 30 students, I have this habit of noticing that one or two or three or five students who are really not managing to come up to the mark, and then pull them up, kind of tell them, go to them, nudge them, see their copy, look into their notebook, whether they're writing down, whether they've been able to solve the problem, whether they're, and ask them questions in particular, that have you understood this? Is this what is written on the board? Have you written the next step? Have you managed to get this answer? So that part of it we weren't able to do. We were talking to a box of 40 students on a Google Meet, and mostly they would not have their videos on. You would have to really threaten them and say once in a while that at least show us your faces. And they had valid excuses because these were students, because Delhi University is a central university and you have students from all over India applying to it. So most of our students are coming from outside Delhi. So these students are living in remote areas, UP, Bihar, South, extreme north, Leh, Ladakh. These students come from all over. And most of these places, their connectivity is very poor. Data is not there. Some of these students are from not so economically well-off families. They cannot afford the data, for the whole day, 8 hours of classes. So mostly they would say that we are operating on a mobile phone. No, we had to innovate. We had to think of softwares that could be used on the mobile phone, because some of them would not even have a laptop. So there were ups and downs, but the positive part was that we managed to connect our students and to connect ourselves with community all over the world, because we had n number of webinars. We could invite anybody from across the world, the experts, which in a physical mode we could not even dream of. So it's been like, we have learned a lot.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And so, Professor, you mentioned you did your MPhil and PhD. Just a question that pops up in the mind, Professor, is that did you do all of this? I think you mentioned, there was a gap between these qualifications, and not all of them were, one is
a long gap, in fact.
So if I could just, ask something about that, Professor, is that why did you, choose not to do one after the other? What was the driver for that? I mean, why did you not think, let me get these studies done with and then pick up and be done with studies and then start, working?
See, I'll be very honest. I'll be honest in the sense that today, when an assistant professor joins, mostly if he or she is not already a PhD in that subject, the chances of getting into a permanent position are very remote. Today, it's kind of become like an eligibility. It may not be an eligibility, but it's become like an essential qualification. But when we came in, at that time, if you were reasonably good in your academic records, and you had a good position in the university, in the merit list, then the professors used to encourage you and get you a placement in the teaching community. They wanted to encourage us to come into. They wanted bright academicians to come into this profession. So what happened in my case was, when I finished my MSc, I was amongst the top few in the post graduation, and within less than a month of finishing my post graduation, I got appointed in Venkateshwar College. I mean, I finished my MSc in July, and I was assistant professor in August. So 88. So, but what seemed to be a very good thing at that time, what it was in fact retrospectively not so good. The reason was that when you join in a temporary position, you have to really prove yourself. You cannot take it for granted that you will get time off to do things which will be for your personal academic growth. You have to concentrate only on the job. You cannot tell your head of the department that, listen, give me a timetable wherein I can go to my lab in the afternoon. research lab in the afternoon. No, they could give you a theory in the morning and they could give you a practical in the afternoon. I mean, those were those days. Today we have a more democratic system and we do take care of the people who are on ad hoc or guest or temporary positions. But at that time, our timetable would run into the whole day. So there was no time to go to the research lab. So what was the next best thing to do? Join an MPhil, which was a part-time course. Okay. So what I did was simultaneous, while I joined this Venkateshwara college, I joined an MPhil class. I finished that MPhil by 90. 88, 89, 90, my degree was awarded. It's a 3-semester course. Now, Hindustan है ना, लड़की को शादी भी करनी होती है. You understand that? By the time you finish your MPhil, you are about 26, 27. So there is a
societal
age where you have to settle in life also. So around that time I got married, and unfortunately or fortunately, my husband was not posted in Delhi. So he was in Bombay, I was in Delhi. To make it work, I had to keep traveling to Bombay off and on. So where was the time to go to a research lab? No time. And then came the baby. Now with the baby at home, how can the mother in India go to a research lab and say that I'll dump my baby with a maid and just not take care? You know how many compromises a woman has to do. So then they say women in STEM, it's very tough. And I'm sure it's tough anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there was a break of about 10 years almost. 2000, my daughter was 5. At 4, she moved into a proper school. By 5, she was settled in a school. That's when I joined my PhD.
Wow.
It was tough.
Extremely so, I'm sure. Extremely. So, you have your husband's in a different city. Your child is there. You're traveling between 2 cities. You're teaching not kindergarten, and I'm not saying it negatively towards kindergarten, teachers, but here it's even more serious studies where it's the college.
Absolutely.
So that's tremendous, pressure, and then to be able to want to do a PhD. So that's not easy in any form or manner. And how did you, get yourself to do that? Still go ahead in spite of all these challenges, Professor.
Jovi, I'll tell you, there were two things that two set of people who actually supported me and pushed me into doing it. One, I could not have done it without the support of my husband. He knew that it was my dream to finish my education with a PhD degree. He knew it. So he would always tell me that you must go back to studies. To my parents, who were a great support. They were themselves academicians. So my mother used to keep telling me that, I want to see that doctor written there. Do what you can, but you must go back to studies. So when I decided to register for PhD, I went and spoke to my husband. By that time, luckily, he had moved to Delhi. So there was some kind of a support at home also. I could spend time in the lab. And I spoke to my parents. I said, alone, he won't be able to manage with the kid. So how do we do it? Honestly, Jovi, I want to share this publicly. My parents, my mother used to teach in a school, and my father was a university professor. They arranged amongst themselves their timetables in a manner that my mother would go to school in the morning, my father would go to his work in the afternoon. So they used to come and park themselves in my house.
Amazing.
Morning, my father would take care of my house and my family. And evening, my mother would support me.
Wow.
And finally, my supervisor. I cannot be grateful, enough to him, because when you go back to studies at that stage, especially a PhD degree, you're a full-grown adult. Here, I had a kid already going to school, and everybody feels that ये तो ऐसे ही मतलब they're not serious. And there are people, research scholars in the lab, who are sitting there from 9 to 5. Now, how can you tell your supervisor, I want to go home at 2:30 because my child comes back from school? How can you do that? So he told me, I will give a recommendation. help you get a study leave from work. So I took study leave from work. Otherwise, I would be teaching, doing my research, managing house. How would I manage this? I did that for 1 year. And after I finished, he said, you first give me 1 year of dedicated work. If you manage to work for 1 year, I will recommend your study leave.
Wow.
So then I took a study leave for 2 years, finished my PhD in record time of 3 years.
Amazing. Amazing.
2003, I finished my PhD, came back to college.
Wow. So that's a great journey, Professor, you've been through. I mean, really tough, very real. There was no escapism. I mean, you just, in spite of all these challenges, you still wanted to go ahead, supported by your dear ones and important people in your life. But hats off to you, Professor. You still managed to go through it, and you didn't want to give up. You didn't say that padhai ke din is over, and you still wanted to carry on, the urge to do that and get that title, and that. So that's absolutely amazing to hear, Professor. And Professor, I know you have to get on with your classes, and but if I could just ask you a question here, Professor. You also mentioned international speakers and exposure with it. You've had that kind of exposure in the environment that you're working, where you interact with international bodies or international researchers, etc., organizations.
Joby, before we wind up and conclude with this, I also want to talk about one small, another milestone in my life, which made a lot of change. And that was, as I told you, I finished my PhD in 2003. I came back to college. In 2010, I wrote a research project. My supervisor, again, during that period from 2003 to 2010, kept encouraging me to continue in research. So while I was teaching, I was also publishing papers, co-authoring papers with people, going to international conferences, presenting our research there. I had exposure of going to some good universities all over the world. And doing that and getting that exposure, I wanted to set up my own research lab. Now, to do that, I needed funds. Okay, so university doesn't give you any funds. So he encouraged me in 2010. This is another gap. From 2003, finishing my PhD, 2010, I wrote a UGC project. The Government of India financed my project. And I set up a research lab in my own undergraduate college, which is known as the Microelectronics Research Lab.
Amazing, amazing.
And today we have a number of research scholars who have already finished their PhD under my guidance in that lab. And there are a couple right now working towards their PhD right now. So now with this exposure to all these researchers in the international community, where I had these opportunities of traveling to various universities, meeting people, interacting with them, sitting down over long discussions on the subject matter, coming back, inculcating it into our work. So now it has really broadened our research. And it's given us so now when we interact with them on the web for our undergraduate students, I can see how I'm helping them, because that helped me about 20 years back. So this has really, this box has widened our, amazing. For me to get that exposure, I had to travel. But today, the research scholars and students have access to all the research from all over the world.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And experts talking to them.
Fantastic, Professor.
So that is how it is. And to be whatever in a very small manner, but it is something we have managed to.
Professor, I won't take more of your time. I want to take this opportunity to thank you once again for coming on the channel. Thank you so much for coming on the channel, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me, Joby, and thank you very much.